Hey guys, Steve here, Ponics. Today we're going to talk about
Growing with fishes. Growing with fishes.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast, episode 347. We are here this week with Dustin Powers from Future 4200. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going, man? Happy to be on again.
Yeah, we had you on way back when before my ciliate, I believe it was last, and had some really cool conversations, and wanted to get you back on for your own episode because it was such a good time. So really appreciate you taking the time to come on. If you guys aren't familiar with the show, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. And you guys can find us on all the different platforms, whatever it is. And this show is also over on Rumble. So if you don't want to watch it on YouTube because of some of their practices lately, you can also watch the show on Rumble. It goes up pretty shortly after it gets finished up here on YouTube when we do it live. So check it out over there if you want to support that platform instead. Alrighty, guys. For those of you that don't know, Dustin Powers is one of the co-creators of one of the coolest websites that's out there. Make sure I got the right screen pulled up. Okay. You can check it out over at Future 4200. They have a lot of really cool discussions on extract tech, all different types of hashtag, all different types of different stuff. I know when I was working on some of the more experimental extractions, especially some of the more exotic solvents, I think it was you and Fuck Combustion were the only two places I could even find some of the more interesting and more rare types of stuff that I've seen out on there, and different ideas that were kind of maybe off the wall or just less traditional. And but it's something that I've really found as kind of a really cool resource. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm happy to be here. It's always fun to talk to like-minded people.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started into this whole universe of all things regenerative and cannabis, and you're also a mushroom expert as well, which we'll get into a little later on. In fact, that's actually where we met in person the first time was out at our good friend Cass, who runs the wonderful event at Myceliate. We met out there. So yeah, so give us a little bit of a background on yourself.
Well, just right off the bat, I'm definitely not an expert in anything mushroom. I'm an amateur, all things mushroom by far. I'm a partner in a mushroom extraction class, but a lot of my businesses are structured this way where I'm the partner that connected all the people that know what the fuck they're doing, put them all together and made a little business and took like a little sliver of it. So we have experts that teach that class. I'm not one of them. But I guess I got started in cannabis same way a lot of people do, is you start smoking and it's expensive and you're a teenager. So the next logical step is to start selling it. And I went to college doing kind of the same thing. And at the time it was medical in Washington. So we were ardent participants in the Washington State medical market. Part of that put me in the car driving all the time. I started listening to the podcast, and I listened to one called the Survival Podcast, and it's all about preparedness for if times get tough, and even if they don't. And he's the one that taught me about permaculture the first time, and that put me on a mission to buy some land, which I did in 2012, about 20 acres out here in Pacific County, Washington, down on the southern coast. And we spent the last decade developing that into a food forest type slope farm with terraces and swales and ponds all interconnected. And then in 2018, I bought the property that I'm on right now. And in COVID, I built this house that we're in. And then we're, building a little homestead with I got 3 small kids. We're kind of just building this little homestead here. After I got out of the medical side of the cannabis, when Washington legalized in 2014, I started poking around on the legal market, and I got hooked up with the skunk farm guys. And that got me into cannabis processing. And one of our farmers actually all of our farmers at the time had this problem where they had all this trim and old material that was laying around. They put it in trash bags and they stack it up in the corner of like their shop. we called them trash bag mountains. We'd go, all the different farms would have these, and we'd go and I figured out like nobody wanted to blast it at the time because the returns were not good, and we were not doing, you know, it was old dirty shit, and the CRC hadn't been invented yet, so it was like pointless to pack tubes of this shit. So we kind of stumbled into ethanol extraction at scale, and we did it super hillbilly, and I just started like explaining that technique to people. We did that for several years, and then Skunk Farm got involved in like a legal battle, and I was doing a little bit of consulting, and the client had asked me a question, and the answer I had just seen somewhere on Instagram. And so I was like, hang on a sec, I think I can find it. And like for 10 minutes, I was scrolling through comments on Instagram. Mind you, this is like 2016, so it was kind of relatively earlier time, smaller cannabis community at the time on Instagram, but I couldn't find it. And I was like, damn, I wish there was a forum for cannabis processing where this question would have been asked, and I could have found it by using the search bar. And then like 2 weeks later, Sidco and I were working a trade show, and Sidco is the co-owner of Future 4200. He's really the primary owner of the majority owner of the website. He said, dude, you should start a forum for extraction. And I was like, man, I don't know anything about that, but I just had that same idea, and I know you know about it. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So he built this whole entire thing, and we just named it after my Instagram handle because we leveraged like the Instagram algorithm at the time to drive a massive amount of traffic to the forum, which then like really ranked up our SEO without even trying at all. And then all of a sudden it became the de facto, like you type in Google, and on Google, like also almost any question about cannabis processing, we're going to be on the first page. It's crazy. So, we did that, and then in the meantime, I had started the Good Life Gang, which is kind of like the physical representation of the community that the forum has cultivated, and is a membership discount club for cannabis processors. So if you process cannabis, I can save you money on equipment and your consumables, guaranteed. And then we also throw cool little events all over the country and sometimes outside of the country. And through all of that, I was an early Bitcoin adopter and a long-term hodler. And all those things put together have allowed me to live this life where I just kind of work on the homestead most of the time. It's great. Hang out with the family. So that's what I do now.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there really is a lot of different cool little rabbit holes you can find on that forum, especially if you're, you know, really trying to perfect a certain way of extraction or hash making. There really is a lot of really good guides on there. It's kind of like the shroomery.org of the cannabis extraction world in terms of depth. Really is a really great resource.
Yeah, and you know, we had earlier forums that existed, but a lot of them are dead, like Icy Mag, and none of them were ever focused on cannabis processing. They were always like mostly cannabis cultivation, and then they'd have like a single sub category for processing, like, you know, hash, and that would be it. And I wanted like a dialed in specifically processing with like one little sub for cultivation, right? We're the opposite. And yeah, it's become, it is still the only real like resource of its kind. And there's a bunch of shit to wade through there. It's ridiculous. We take a very hands-off approach to the moderation of the site for section 230E, or no, the Community Decency Act, right? That's the CDA. Yeah. Publisher versus platform, right? The more you moderate, the more likely they are to classify you as a publisher, and you become liable for everything that is done on your platform. Or it's not a platform anymore, it's now your newspaper effectively. Like, you know, if you edit and moderate the content, then it's a newspaper, not a platform. And there's a fine line with the government on what that means. So if you're running this forum that's talking about this pseudo illegal, you know, or pseudo legal, who knows, process of processing, you know, hash, especially when we started, it's getting, you know, it's less and less of a problem as we move on. But, you know, starting a cannabis processing forum does have implications, and the type of people that are going to use it are liable to do things on there that they shouldn't be doing, that I don't want to be liable for. I mean, go for it, do it all on your own, but I don't want it to be something that I get attached to, right? So in that sense, not wanting to be liable for what the people do there, we took a hands-off approach to the moderation as much as possible, and it's had its ups and downs for sure.
Have you had any and you feel free to not answer this one, but have you had any issues with the government fucking with you guys at all over the years?
No,
Or
absolutely not. And Sidco has like a canary baked in, and if you search, you can read about it and figure out what that means and how that works. Because he got grilled pretty hard on it. And I was like, look, if the government wants to come and take the files, they're going to take them, and I promise you, I'll tell you guys that that's happened. Right? You can't say no to them. They can't stop them. They already have it. They already have all of it. They're really just coming to tell you we took them all. By the way, if you're lucky, I think most of the time they have all the files. They don't tell you that they have the files, and they maybe are looking at it, maybe not. You don't get to know. They don't tell you until they knock on the door and say, hey, it's time to go to jail now, right? And hopefully it's fucked. So
yeah,
as far as I know, they've never approached me and said, hey, we're looking at this. Yeah, to think that like local PD haven't been on the forum, there's not a chance that hasn't happened, because it's like I said, when you Google all sorts of, you're a fucking Louisiana cop trying to figure out what the fuck they're talking about, THC, D9, all of a sudden these gummies are fucking left and right in the mail, and they got it in the States over, like what is going on? You go and start Googling, you're gonna come across the forum. That's where you're gonna get, like, it's just it's like the de facto resource. So you know, our policy is don't do anything fucking illegal.
right.
Yeah. Go, dude, and Sidco goes out of his way to show people like safer ways to communicate digitally. He's like an OPSEC madman. He helped me harden a bunch of my operations back in the day. That's kind of like how we met initially. We met initially because his mom is an original skunk farmer, Catherine.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I thought I knew what I was doing until I hung out with some of the people at Occupy, and it brought my stuff to a whole new level back in the like 2011, 2012, whatever that was.
That's how I was too. I felt pretty good about what I was doing, and then I came across Sidco, and he's like, decent, but here's why you're fucked, and then set me up on the right path.
Yeah, it's always a wild time, especially like you were saying back in the day when there was a lot more eyes looking for that kind of information because it wasn't really freely available unless you had access to some of the harder to get by books and things like that. We
And
were
people
talking
weren't.
about we
Oh,
were
go ahead.
talking about, for instance, on the last episode, or maybe it was on that smoke show about THC for instance, and how to make that, and it was the art of hash making, modern hash making, or whatever it was back in the early 70s. But that was like the only published time before the internet, really, that you could even find that in a published form. And if you didn't have access to that book, you didn't even know it existed. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it was
yeah.
like a whole different time back then compared to what we have now. If AI, you can ask the AI.
Dude, some of the AI chemistry models that are like coming up with new organic pathways to some of these synthetic fucking analogs is nuts. Like finding new ways for people to just go to the store and buy like random ingredients and get to where they think they want to be on the other end. Like I wouldn't touch any of the fucking mushroom gummies of any type in any store right now. Like odds are it's some kind of soup full of weird analogs and DMT derivatives. Like no good. You don't want that. It's like it's D8 but on crack. It's whack.
Huh. I have not heard of this. Please elaborate on this because this is something I have not heard of being a huge issue. I know a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people that are getting into the gummies now too, so this is good info.
Yeah, 4-MeO DMT. That right? 5-MeO DMT is psilocin.
Five
So
MEOD.
is psilocin,
Oh no,
right?
psilocin
Four or
is
five. It's one of the two. Psilocin,
it's
whichever
gotta
one
be
it's not. The other one starts with a B. But it's and anyways, it's just a DMT analog. Um, but dude, it's so crazy. And those are just pick the number and then alphabet soup, and there's just endless amount of these psychedelic analogs that are popping up right now. Research chemicals. You hear someone say research chemicals, that's what they're talking about. And a huge percentage of these gummies that are supposed to be from psilocybin based gummies are not. I was looking at, someone just sent me this COA of just a fucking soup of analogs, and also had ibotenic acid and mucimol. It had a bunch of ibotenic acid and it had mucimol. I was like, so okay, so and
what?
I sent it off to one of my chemist buddies, and I was like, okay, like impression. All he did was send him the picture and said impressions, and he's like, "What the fuck, bro?" I was, and he kind of confirmed. He said, "Okay, this top portion up here looks like a soup. Like maybe it was an extract that they then went for some crazy conversions, a mess, like bad. Let's see the chromatogram. I bet it's just dirty as fuck." And then he's like, "And also, wait a minute, what's up with the ibotenic acid mucimol? They definitely took like a." Amanita extract, a crude Amanita extract that was not decarbed and just added it straight back in. Like, it's the basics. If you decarb that extract, if you decarb the ibotenic acid in that extract, you'll increase the mucimol content. Why wouldn't you decarb your crude? Ibotenic acid is poisonous, it's toxic. Like, why would you want to leave that in there? So if they're doing that base level chemistry, why would you expect these guys to be able to do much higher level conversion chemistry to like into, and then you're consuming that? You're talking about bathtub chemistry that you guys are consuming on like, if you thought D8 was bad, this is night and day worse.
Just to clarify, it was 4-hydroxy DMT.
Oh, hydroxy, that's right, 4-hydroxy DMT.
Yeah,
Um,
that was the confusion.
that's psilocin.
Yes, psilocin.
Okay,
yes.
so then 5-hydroxy DMT is popping up all over the place, and then 5-MCO or 5-ACO. I forget. Anyways, again, alphabet soup. They're continuously popping up, and we see it a little bit in the cannabinoids too. I was just reading about another one, THC, JP or something. Like, it's endless with the
JH. I just bought some the other day just because I hadn't seen it in a store before, and it was at the adult store. I was like going there. I was looking for they make this weird chocolate. I was going there for this chocolate that my girlfriend was looking for, and we saw a commercial for it, so we were walking by after dinner, and it was like next door, so we stopped in there to grab some. And they didn't have the chocolates, but they had a box of this THC JH, and I was like, "What the fuck is that?" Apparently, it's another, CBD formed something or other.
maybe.
You know, but yeah, it's really wild. And this is something else too. Like, is there issues? So for people that don't know, like the biggest issue with D8 is the fact that like you're getting different isomers of the D8. It's not like with the plant where you don't have anywhere near as many isomers and stuff like that.
It's not necessarily the D8. Like, most of the isomers of D8 are pretty beneficial. It's first of all, what are the compounds and chemicals that they used in that conversion? Did they get them all the way back out? Are you sure that you're not consuming those fucking chemicals that are harsh as hell? Like the different type of catalysts that they use and the solvents that they use are not things that you want in your body. And like, so when we're talking about pharmaceutical grade procedures and products, there's a reason that you don't buy pharmaceuticals at some dude who was in finance a couple of years ago, or like that didn't have a degree, isn't a pharmacist, doesn't have a chemistry degree, is doing relatively high level chemistry and getting really sloppy end products and then selling it to you as D8. And that's the same thing that's going on with the mushrooms. But I've consumed quite a bit of D8 and I'm not dead, and I really did appreciate the effects of D8. And we were doing very mild reactions. We were putting like bentonite, just acidic bentonite, which is a clay, like dirt, effectively filled, like purified clay dirt that uses as a filter aid, and you put that in the boiling flask while doing a distillation. So you've just got this clay while you're cooking your crude or your first pass distillate, and that would convert quite a bit of the THC to D8 and other isomers, I'm sure. And that's what we were putting in vape pens. It came like water clear. We were putting in that in vape pens for years, or like early we were putting that in there. And that stuff is the only thing that's ever cured me of my seasickness. My dad would take me fishing out in the ocean every year, and up until those, it was miserable. I was fucking sick. Brought a vape pen once, one of these ones that we made, and I was good the whole time. And ever since, like, even regular cannabis dabbing won't necessarily do it for me, but the D8 has like a powerful antiemetic property. So purified D8 is really valuable in like the medical space with kids, because especially the kids going through chemotherapy, because part of the problem is they can't stay nourished because they throw up all their food. But with high levels of D8, they can fight that gag reflex, basically the antiemetic effect, and really helps with their overall chemotherapy outcomes, which is kind of interesting.
That's really cool. I've had a lot of good luck with different sublingual versions and different THC to CBD ratios with linalool for those types of patients as well.
Nice.
Yeah. I was gonna say, so is there any other kind of like concerns with like what you were talking about earlier with some of these different mystery soups, with some of the different isomerizations, with some of these different mushroom compounds versus plant compounds? Can some of those be more of a problem, or like what are some of the other issues that kind of people aren't considering?
People are taking a crude extract of Amanita muscaria, which is a toxic mushroom. It has ibotenic acid. Pull ibotenic acid up. Let's look at that. This is not a compound that you want to be consuming. It is a compound that the plant has specific, or the mushroom has specifically to keep you from eating it. And like I said, incredibly simple to remediate from the extract with just a little bit of heat. It decarbs nicely right over into mucimol, which is the target active ingredient. Like, that is the goal. It says psychoactive, but and it might be. See, it's a prodrug of mucimol. Let's see, it's a powerful neurotoxin, and it's a brain lesioning agent. So it's making little slices in your brain. Says negligible in small doses, but dude, not ideal. And again, if you go down decarboxylation into mucimol, and then that's the, so like there's no reason for you not to decarb. And there's lots of reasons why you might not want to be giving people ibotenic acid. And it like when it says in small doses it might be negligible, but in high doses it slices up your brain. Like, I'm going to assume that the person that's consuming this on the other end is an absolute idiot, right? Like, just as a liability risk, let's just assume. And so if they can go to the gas station and buy endless gummies that's got ibotenic acid in it, how long till they can hit a high dose? They eat fucking 10 bags, 20 bags of ibotenic acid, and all of a sudden they got brain lesions? No, thank you. What's going on? So right there, like, that's the risk of this gas station pharmacology is, you know who John Jones is, the fighter? He's an MMA fighter. He's like best in the UFC at his weight class, constantly getting in trouble. Had a fight maybe last year or the year before, but failed his drug test and was like, "Look, I'm 100% clean. I promise." Here's the exact list of all the things I take. And one of the things that he took all the fucking time was boner pills from the gas station, little like bumblebee, caffeine pills or whatever. And so they did a bunch of tests. Dude, you wouldn't believe the meth and steroids and just everything you could possibly imagine, these little pills. That's the same level that you're getting quality wise over here. You're lucky if it's got psychedelic mushroom compounds in it at all. There's a very high risk of it being research chemicals from China. So, dude, know your fucking source on all of this. Like, go to the grower, find somebody that's growing mushrooms, grow your own mushrooms and just eat those. If you're really so set on eating mushrooms, which I fully support, get one of these like ready to go grow bags that you can grow in like in your closet or whatever, and it takes zero work. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's totally crazy that it's that level of nuts. I remember back when I used to work in IT, back when I was when I used to work at the cyber cafe back when I was 15, 16, used to buy those stacker twos, those little yellow pills at the gas station. You take like two of those, you can stay up for 2 or 3 days. Those are great. And you'd be able to buy no dose. I don't even think that's legal anymore.
I don't think you can buy no-dos anymore, but you could just like, and it said it was just a bunch of caffeine, but you're buying what appears to be a pharmaceutical at the gas station. Like, there's no regulate there. That's not true. There is regulation. It's not enforced at all. It's the same as, because of the hemp confusion with everything, cannabis is very minimally enforced anymore because the police have their hands tied on what's legal and what's not legal. Like, if it's just THCA flower, it's hemp, apparently. So people be selling weed in Texas. It's nuts at every store, everywhere you go.
certainly a wild time. And I was going to ask you too about all the different new cannabinoids that are on the market. I know I've seen THCP, which I know I read the article about that a year or two ago, but seeing like the JH and the THCH and all these other funky ones, like I know that not all cannabinoids necessarily are safe. Off the bat, there's actually was a pretty gnarly study in Portugal where they had 32 patients and like 18 of them ended up dying of them ultimately of that initial dosage with I forget which cannabinoid it was, some experimental cannabinoid. So
Dude, some of them are bad, and like some of them in some of the old pharmacology books, like because cannabis became illegal, but it didn't, there wasn't like a kibosh on researching it until like 20, 30 years after it became illegal. So there was this little like window where they're still doing research. And one of the pharmacology books lists out all the cannabinoids that they synthesized and had like toxicity ratings and like euphoria ratings. And some of them are like, all of the monkeys died immediately. Or like, it'll have like, instead of a bunch of pluses, it'll have like -1 on the euphoria and then like -3 on the, safety. And it's like all the monkeys killed each other. It's like, dude, some of them. And so what that tells me is that there's probably a bunch that are in between too. So, and that's the most dangerous kind of poison, right? Is the one where you don't necessarily know, like, okay, you consume this thing for 6 months or a year and it's built up this like low, long-term dose that's now liver toxic, right? And that's like the ibotenic acid, right? Like, sure, maybe a little tiny bit of it, okay. A little tiny bit of it every day, I don't know. Like a little bit of it in the morning and the evening, no, probably going to build up toxic amounts and your brain starts bleeding, right? Like that. You don't want to stumble into one of those and be the guinea pig for everybody else. At least I don't.
right, yeah, it's totally crazy, and some of these have pretty wild histories. So
This is
THCO acetate was developed as a aerosol weapon by the military. It's actually in the Edgewood Arsenal experiments, which there's lots of hilarious videos on YouTube if you want to check those out. It was one of the drugs that was used in that testing as a non-lethal agent. Basically, the idea was to make people so stoned that they couldn't fight back. Which, to be honest with you, it's kind of a great idea for a
it's
weapon.
really
You know,
not
to
bad
like,
if you've
yeah,
never been high before and somebody blasts you with like a military grade vapor cloud of THCO acetate. Yeah, you could potentially get fucked up.
yeah. You're certainly
uh,
not doing a lot of any high level thinking. That's for sure.
no, like imagine you're in a bunker and they gas you with THCO acetate, just like fucking hotbox the thing to the max. Like you're done for.
Right? And everyone gets to go home at the end of the day. Like it's the best, like
Well,
even worse solutions,
maybe.
like
Yeah,
most
or
of them
you
anyway.
yeah, take you to the camp.
Yeah. But whoever, ultimately, if we can move war in that direction, I think that the world would be a better place. That's for sure. But it
Um,
is
so we can
it
take
is
better hostages, you mean?
well, just less death at least.
Less injured
Um,
hostages, yeah.
yeah, yeah, just injured from falling over.
Yeah,
They're
they're cheaper to maintain if you don't injure them when collecting them. It's just
yeah.
basic livestock management.
Anyway, but there's also a thing I was reading. Whereas there was an interesting thing that came out last year about how if it's over, I believe, it was 680 degrees Fahrenheit, so you give a really hot dab of it, actually can have some level of toxicity to it because it breaks down. I forget the acetate component of it or something like that. That was an
Yeah,
interesting paper I was reading the other day.
look, there's not a single good reason to be taking dabs at 680 fucking degrees or hotter, or anywhere near it, really. And
Oh yeah,
there's a huge multitude of bad, like terrible, maybe die reasons, like yeah, turning your terpenes into direct carcinogens because you cooked them at 680 degrees. Yeah, that should be enough to scare anyone away from hot dabs. So proceed with caution.
have you done any playing around on any of the refrigerant extractions or anything like that, or any of the other more exotic stuff? Or
No, just because the peddlers of those ideas are always so scammy that it's just like scary. It just turned me off to the idea. I with CO2, if you consider CO2 a refrigerant, which it can act as, yes, I have quite a bit of experience with CO2 extraction, but as far as like Freon or the R304 or whatever the green gas is, no, just the hydrocarbons.
sure. You had a great talk on mushrooms and cattle. Did you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I heard good things.
Yeah, that was super interesting. And actually, I'm going to go back this year and I'm going to talk more about um, our gut microbiome versus the cow gut microbiome, and it kind of all plays together. But I've been on a deep dive on that in this year. But yeah, the like a couple important takeaways is usually the way that psychedelic mushrooms is spread around the world is by humans' management of ruminating cattle effectively, but other ruminants too. And the other super interesting takeaway is that most of the fungi that live in the gut of a cow and your gut are anaerobic, whereas typically all fungi are aerobic. They breathe air, but the ones in your gut do not breathe air. They actually die in the presence of air. Those ones also have flagellum. So they're like mobile in your gut. They can swim around and pursue food sources. The fungi in your gut most likely control the entire bacterial scape because they're effectively farming bacteria for exudates, is the thought process right now, which is super recent. Up until like maybe 10 years ago, they thought that those little swimming fungi were protozoa because they're swimming. And they're like, well, for like mushrooms don't swim, they don't have flagellum. So, and flagellum's that little corkscrew thing on the end that allows little like single cellular organisms to move around, or like, you know, small cellular organisms that swim around. So they're like, it must be protozoa. But in the just recently, like last 10 years, it got reclassified into fungi, which is super interesting. So there's fungi that swim around and don't breathe air inside of your gut, and they kind of rule the whole thing. And the implications of that are if I can, like, if I apply KNF to my gut, right, like I'm looking to find healthy indigenous microbes, cultivate them, like grow yogurt or kefir with them, and then consume those into the system because I'm feeding that gut biome with all those organisms. I like that that one's fuzzy. Yeah, so little fungi that swim around like that, which is interesting.
Nice.
Those those could potentially be like the most genetically advanced fungi because then because you're looking for like that step, you know, the missing links between fungi and the next step of life. Like how did it get from there to the next, if that's the route it came, right? Um, and that's a solid step towards it.
I like that you mentioned kefir as well, because I'm a big proponent of mixing that with traditional labs for making, especially for treating like mold out, like powdery mildew or those types of things in plants. I find like the diversity just helps a lot. Also, you get the more vitamin B output because a lot of those lactobacillus put out different vitamin B groups in that particular, kefir and the traditional labs as well. So you end up with that, increased growth from that as well, depending on what you're growing.
Yeah, we're just about to do like a long yogurt ferment with L Rootery, which is for the kids. And it's supposed to be one that actively combats SIBO, which maybe one of my kids has, maybe not, but he's just got like some like skin inflammation that probably is attributed to a gut overgrowth. So we've like seriously ramped up the ferments, even though that's like, it was kind of a bulk of what we eat, you know, meat that we grew and then some of the plants that we grew fermented. But we really ramped it up. So there, I started doing kefir because apparently kefir has a significantly higher both diversity and CFU count than yogurt, and it's way easier to do. It's you get the culture that you can buy a culture that'll come freeze dried in the mail, and you put it in like raw or ideally raw milk, and you leave it on the counter for a couple of days, and it's turned into kefir. It's fucking fantastic. Like yogurt is relatively easy too. If you got a Instapot, you can make yogurt. It just keeps it at the right temperature, but it cultures at a warmer temperature, like 115 degrees Fahrenheit, where the kefir will go at room temperature. Although at like 80, it really thrives. I've found, which is super easy. That's a heat mat. So now I just have warm milk on the counter, turning into like a probiotic super drink. And then we've been also feeding the kefir more prebiotic fiber. So like a ribene, which I am probably butchering the name of that. I think it's like a galactonate. It comes from like the larch tree. That's a super one. We're looking into some gummies too that are like prebiotic gummies, because most of our ingredients already are prebiotics because of the avoidance of cane sugar. We went down different routes. So like tapioca syrup is a powerful prebiotic. It's an insoluble. And the reason that a lot of these sweet things are low on the glycemic index is because they are insoluble. But insoluble just means that it doesn't pass the gut barrier. Doesn't mean that your gut biome doesn't feed on it. And that's why there's this like, people will say fiber is not important. And there are people that are strict carnivore that are proving that that is true. But also, if you're going to eat a balanced diet, if you're not just going to eat steaks every night, which it seems to be you can eat steaks every night and do pretty damn good, which is its own separate thing. But if you want to be like a little bit more balanced, then it makes a lot of sense to focus on feeding this gut biome that's going to handle the plants that you're about to put in it. And I think a lot of it has to do with we're not super optimized to eat really any type of plants unless they've been processed or fermented. And if you don't, then it's going through like really rough stages of fermentation in your gut that's not optimized to do. But like take your cabbage and turn it into kraut, and so the bioavailability of the nutrients in there goes way up. And more importantly, it's like, again, look at KNF. You're not trying to, it's not that you don't have enough nutrients in the soil. It's that you're not feeding the life that's there, and you don't have enough life that's there, the microbiome, right? And so feeding the microbiome unlocks the nutrients that are in your food. Seems to be the key here, and also keeping the balance of the fungi to bacteria in its prospective zones. Like what's in your actual stomach is a much different situation than what's in like, it's very segmented throughout the rest of your gut. Like the first couple feet is a very specific culture of bacteria and fungi are optimal for that area. And then the next, and these little zones have names as well. I couldn't tell you on the top, but if you look at in detail, and maybe we passed on pulling that up right now, but it's really interesting stuff, and it's something that I hadn't even really dug into the science of it until recently. It's pretty crazy. It's definitely my passion. My fungi passion is falling into this like internal gut fungi, which is this wide open field. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's super cool. And there isn't a lot of study on a lot of that. One of the other ones I wanted to mention too, just because we're on the topic, shout out Clackamas Coot for recommending this one a while ago as well. Your average bamboo shoots, fermented bamboo shoots, you can buy at the Asian store, even in the Asian section, has up to 327 different strains of lactobacillus. Which again, if
Sweet.
you're trying to increase biodiversity, you can find that in most parts of the world pretty easily, and or even make it yourself. Make mizu, and that can be another great way to further diversify your lactobacillus cultures. So again, if you're looking for that type of stuff, I highly encourage that. And yeah, I mean, if you guys checked out last week's episode, or not last week's, the week before, we have a really cool natural farming AI that we're working on getting up and running for people. We'll have a great episode next week on Growcast with Caleb and I, giving some cool new demos with Jordan and talking about the AI over there, along with a preview of some of the cool voice stuff that we're working with as well. Ultimately, we're hoping to make it for people that aren't even literate, so that they can just talk to it and ask it things and then get a voice response back in a similar in their language, which is super cool, which we demoed over on Jordan's show. So definitely check it out as well, if you haven't already. But it is really kind of cool to see the merger of things like that. So what we did was we took all like Duke's database and a bunch of these other different huge data sets of plant nutrients, and then fed them in so that you can make much more nutrient dense, FPJs and other things like that much more better account for individual plant nutrition. To kind of take that concept and refine it. And there was a gentleman we had on from Vietnam that was kind of doing this for aquaponics and liquid hydro. And I think it's really cool to kind of see, your work doing this with the fungi and stuff like that kind of can take this to a whole new different direction with those same concepts, but down this other way that we haven't even touched. And
No,
you also have
dude,
a lot of,
it's so crazy. It's literally KNF for your gut, but instead of using rice, I'm using dairy and growing out all these different like yogurts and kefirs, and you can just slightly tweak the indigenous microbe that you start with to grow out in that culture. And then I'm using that to then I'm just multiplying it so that when I put it inside of me, it's maximized, right? I'm playing with another really cool one. It's yeast. It's Saccharomyces boulardii, and it's used in winemaking to make like rosés. It's not. It can't live in your gut for very long, so you have to like continuously consume it. But I just took a bunch of blueberries and boiled them, and then when it cooled down, mixed in the Saccharomyces, and then let it ferment for a couple days in there and grow out. Got all bubbly. It tasted like blueberry bread dough. I mean, it was just blueberries blended up with the yeast culture, but it's and then just I just put that in the fridge. It's good for a couple weeks like that, and then you can just save a little bit of the culture and add it to your next batch. And I feed the kids like a tablespoon of that a day. We all eat a tablespoon of that a day, and it's got all sorts of crazy benefits in the gut biome. It's really interesting that you can just dose your biome with these beneficial microbes that you've maximized in a solution, and the effects that it can have on you. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's fun. It's like a fun little biohack.
That's really cool. Have you done anything with like Jacobah or anything like that? Are you familiar with that?
I don't know
There's
what
an
that is.
there's an aquatic fungi, and I was here. Let me throw some images up here for people that aren't familiar with it. It's aquatic and it's rice wash grown.
Oh, okay, but not a lab.
So
What
it
is
grows
this? Looks like
these.
coral.
Yeah, it looks like let me throw up some full images up here real quick.
What on earth? They're growing this in rice water?
Yes, it grows in water, and you can look it up. There's very few recipes I've posted in the Korean natural. If you look it up in the Korean natural farming group, I've put together 3 or 4 different full posts in it on
Are
Facebook. But
you pretty good like active like you know quite a bit about KNF?
oh yeah, yeah, I'm real good friends with Chris, trained under him. I've used different KNF methods around the world. So, yep, very familiar.
But if you had to recommend a book or like a couple books on KNF, what would you recommend? Is
Uh,
there even such a thing, or you've got to like dig it out? Like, did the Master Cho or whoever like write the guidebook and like
so
it's been
yeah, so
deciphered?
there is the original Master Cho book, but a lot of that stuff is outdated at this point, where we kind of have some additional stuff that's tweaked it or changed it, or the process is a little bit different. I think the
Hmm.
best source currently out there is really Chris Trump. He's kind of
Yeah.
perfected stuff like a little bit more than everyone else, I think, for the most part, on a lot of different topics, not everything across the board, but for instance, like his discovery with the IPMO is really kind of game changing when it comes to pest control. You know, being able to make pest control that works for a really wide range of insects that typically you don't have an easy biocontrol for, or certainly not one that you could produce on site. That was game changing. It saved my ass in Zimbabwe, and it really knocked about everything except for the thrips in Thailand. You know, that was the only thing that seemed to be of any kind of resistance to it. So, you know, it really is super, super great for treating just a huge. I've even had people write me and say it worked on their broad mites. I mean, I'm not claiming it works on that, but I have people that are using it for that and have great success. So, and I've had great luck with stink bugs, leaf hoppers. We used it on bombardier beetles, or not bombardier beetle, blister beetles that give the ulcers on the goats and stuff like that. Work great on them in Oklahoma. So it really does work on it. So, and you're only culturing the local bacteria or fungi that are on your property already. You're increasing the population, you know, and it's very, very non-toxic and something I
Yeah.
think really is you know, something that's really different. So that again, that in my opinion, he's kind of the best source of knowledge on it. But book-wise, there's a really good one on Jadam insect control that I really like. But that's
And
probably the best.
Jadam is can you tell me what that acronym is?
So
Jadam.
Jadam was kind of like KNF for people that want to be a little less precise, I guess. I call it the sloppy, lazy version of KNF, at
Nice.
least my
I like
personal
that. So
opinion.
sounds good to me.
But I think that a lot of times, this is my opinion on it. Jadam, you can screw it up easier and create like a disaster easier than with KNF because KNF is a little more precise and you're doing a little bit more targeted collections of things, whereas Jadam is a little more shotgun blasting with microbe collections in particular. And I've seen people have more problems accidentally trying, you know, not do it quite to understanding it with Jadam than I have with KNF. So, and also if you're trying to pass like a food safety thing, like you're gonna have way better luck passing with liquid IMO than you are with JLF. Just like,
For sure.
especially if they're doing microbial testing, like it's just not
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
happen.
for sure. Yeah, no, if you're growing weed, super important because I've like read Masanobu's One Straw Revolution super early and have taken a lot of his practices to heart. And a lot of it is like do nothing. And you know, this is a microbiologist that realized that he didn't know shit and didn't even really need to know shit about it because as long as he worked these systems that you know these natural systems and work with nature. And so like for instance, I was reading this just kind of like guideline to KNF, and I was reading about KNF poultry, and I'm already doing 90% of what it said to do. The only thing I'm missing is like the intentional inoculation of my deep litter mulch floor, which you know I learned through other people as like a carbon blanket or a carbon diaper, effectively that just composts in place, and it's on a dirt floor, so it just like the indigenous microbes that are there are in it, and it's composting, and that just kind of cycles into the garden constantly. But I know I could be boosting that whole setup, and I could be boosting the birds directly with some ferments that they would like directly consume. Yeah, so I gotta take Chris's class. He doesn't have a book? I'm surprised he doesn't have a book. I'll talk to Chris as well. I've become decent friends with Chris in the past couple of years because of Cassandra.
He's a great online course and stuff as well if you can't make his in-person ones, and he's got a wonderful YouTube where he talks about most of the basic stuff in depth over there as well for people that are just getting into it. The other one that I think is really interesting that people don't talk about just on the Canis is Nigel Palmer. He did some work with like vinegar extractions and trying to get more like ppm values on a lot of the KNF stuff, kind of focusing on like a lot more like what I did with the aquaponic merging with the KNF is trying to focus on mineral values at the same time and kind of utilizing it as like a machine to increase bioavailability of those. So he's another one that has a lot of published ppm values for different KNF. Probably the only other person aside from myself that spent any amount of time or money, ppm testing for your normal grow nutrients on KNF stuff. Chris has some stuff as well. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I guess in like a relatively close small system like that, it matters more than like, you know, field cropping. I'm not necessarily as concerned about the ppms per, you know, square foot of my soil. And I know people, farmers are, but I'm always of the opinion we just add a bunch of organic material to the field at the end of the year. Ideally some manure and organic material, and the compost is going to kind of do its thing, right? Especially if we're doing a broad scale IMO what IMO 5 is that the right terminology? Like the late
Yeah.
stage IMO where you've taken it and you've now spread it to the mass. Like I'm making a giant vat of yogurt.
Nice. I had a really good luck using lactobacillus 4 extractions as well. I don't know if you played with that at all. So for instance, if you do like I call it super labs or blue labs. So we'll
Your rice
isolate
water
the
lab.
so we'll do labs, but we'll do spirulina and kelp. So we'll do 2 pound or 1 pound of spirulina to like a quarter pound of kelp to get the auxins, and then the to like 4 gallons of milk, and then a quarter gallon of rice wash, and make a really big batch. And you can scale that down as well. You don't have to use quite as much milk, but basically it rips out the phycocyanin from the spirulina, and it really makes this incredible growth accelerator. You can all when you based off that separation layer of the blue. In fact, I could pull up pictures of it, but um, what's cool is you can put it on a plant that's heavily damaged. Like I had some peppers that my ex forgot to water, and the leaves all were dried on these peppers. They were all maybe about foot tall, foot and a half tall. The leaves were like paper, crumble off. We poured, and they hadn't been watered in 3 4 weeks. Poured on the super labs, and within 3 days there was new branches coming out of every dead leaf node off this plant that was dead. For all intents and purposes, was completely dead, and it brought this thing not necessarily back to life. It wasn't completely dead, but it basically rehabilitated it enough to come back. And I've never seen anything else have that kind of like resuscitation factor on plants that were just basically in all other cases just a complete lost cause.
Yeah, would have been
So
dead otherwise.
yeah, so if you have an emergency, like you come in and like everything's trash, or you're cleaning up from someone else's mess, a few things can resurrect plants the way that can. Or hey, you're beating an insect outbreak back. You just need to rejuvenate the plants and give them that extra oomph to kind of recover, so you can meet your harvest times or whatever. It really, really is great. Just in flowering time, sometimes it can slow flowering if you hit it right when they're you know, right the first 2 weeks when you flip them. So I don't recommend using it then, but anytime outside of that transition period is perfectly fine.
Nice. Well, I don't understand in KNF like the sustainability issue with having to use refined sugar. What like that? I that's the part I don't like. I as someone that intends or like shoots to operate with closed systems, you know, or like circular systems, the the for me being able to grow a shit ton of refined sugar for the osmotic, you know, purposes and to feed the microbes is not sustainable. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I definitely understand that part of it. It just comes down to chemistry of if you want to shelf stabilize your soil microbes for 3 or 4 years. No one's
Mhm.
figured out another way to do that yet.
Can you
That's
use honey?
I'm not sure. I do know that honey has some additional compounds the bees put in it that make it more antimicrobial. That's why
And
it
that's
works
an
good
issue,
as a wound dressing, for instance. So,
right?
it could have, and also too, think about it. If you had different, it would depend on the flower as well. What flowers were they harvesting that from? Because many flowers have secondary, metabolites that would also
Hmm.
be antifungal or anti. I can think of a few off the top of my head that would be antibacterial or antifungal off the bat because of the nectar.
Yeah. In even if I like refining honey, it's not that difficult. You can dehydrate it, crystallize it out, wash it, get it down to like its sugar components pretty quickly. Um, but that's the only where I'm at. I could see in certain places where like maple syrup, you could do the same thing. You could refine a sugar out of maple syrup, but other than that, it becomes this like at scale. It seems like such a large cost, right? Like if I'm trying to do broad scale KNF of, you know, think like 100 acres of food forest, the amount of sugar I'm going to need is substantial, right?
Yes, but you're only like you're using it to either for your FPJs or you're doing it mostly for your IMO, right? For stabilizing your IMO
Hmm.
collections. Um, so yeah, you do use a decent amount, but you also don't need a whole lot. You know what I mean? If you're doing
Yeah, it's
100
super
acres, you don't need
concentrate. Yeah,
exactly. So it's not, at least for the IMO portion, and yeah, all of them are at a 1 to 1,000 almost on
right.
dilution rate. So did someone else in chat mention maybe sugar beets could be a potential
Definitely.
alternative?
That'd be, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, certain, then it gets down to the like, I don't know, the amount of processing it takes to get to the refined sugar. It seems like a big like spot where there could be like a massive refinement of the technique that replaces the refined sugar aspect. And I understand like that it's playing multiple different roles, which is nice and concise, but uh, kind of it kind of like breaks the Masanobu model of no work. And dude was so successful in Japan with his rice farming, like some of the highest yielding rice farms in the entire country with the least amount of inputs. And I could just imagine him being told that he needed to have all this sugar that he was doing all these concoctions with, and he probably would have shrugged at it and said, "Sure, it probably works great, but I'm not doing it. It's too much work."
That's
So,
definitely one of the differences with Jadam. They don't use the sugar the same way like KNF does. Definitely is one criticism for sure about it. Speaking of extracts and honey, have you done much in the world realm of proper mushroom extracts? You talked about all the crappy ones, but I know I've experimented with both mead and honey and 70% alcohol to 30% water extracts and a little bit one or two runs with the ice extracts. But what have you found really to be kind of the safest methodology for extraction?
as far as like extraction on a psychedelic mushroom,
Yeah.
safest would probably be like an acidic water extraction for you guys. best is going to be methanol, but you probably shouldn't be playing with methanol if you're not in like an appropriate lab. An ethanol extraction and a sonicator will work decent. And then just with a little bit of acid base, you can get the compounds where you need them to be in the correct solvent. I'm a big fan of the psychedelic extracts though. It's much friendlier on my gut. I'm super sensitive to chitin, so raw mushrooms, raw psychedelic mushrooms, can, you know, eat dried or fresh, doesn't matter. I did not sit well with me.
Yeah, that's
So
definitely something I found as well. Taking, putting it into a carrier and taking them sublingually was much more pleasant on the stomach for sure.
yeah, now I've had like ground fruiting bodies that are in chocolates, and also gummies that also don't give me the gut, and it's potentially because those finely ground up mushrooms have been emulsified into the fats or the sugar like constituents that are in there, allowing them to get past wherever. It really feels like the chitin is disruptive to my like gut, like like my stomach, but it's hard to say where you're when you don't feel good in your gut, which part it's coming from. But I really feel like it's in my stomach, and by the time it gets past that, I'm fine. But if you eat a couple grams of raw mushrooms, always makes me feel like makes my gut feel bad. But the equivalent in the extract, not at all. I feel great.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I wish more people had access to for sure, because it's I think in the next couple of years we're going to see a lot more legalization, and it's going to be helping a lot more people than people realize. These fingers
I think
crossed
so.
anyway. Premier warlord Trump takes office, all bets are off.
Yeah, I don't know. The cat's like out of the bag. It doesn't even, the government can't go against the tide, right? It's just about getting the tide to move in the right direction. And right now, the tide it's like bodegas in New York City, right? You're gonna shut down a fucking thousand of them, and they won't ever stop it. They now know that they can do it, right? They're gonna keep selling all this shit, especially now that it's all hemp. Like, there's no way in hell that he could go backwards.
Well, it's really funny here in Tennessee now, with I went to the dispensary the other day, it's a head shop. In the back, you never know if it's there. It was all THCA, and
Yeah,
half the stuff's been dusted with THCA crystals. So you look at it and it's like, you know, sparkling and all, and it's like, this is ridiculous. Like, can we just tax this and stop being stupid? Like, this is ridiculous,
yeah,
just nuts.
nuts.
Yeah, when and it's what's, I don't know. It's why there's so much weird extraction shit going on right now, is because of this funky gray area, because of the way the hemp law was written.
Yeah, 100%. It's whack.
What do you kind of see as the kind of future of the next year or two in terms of extract stuff and trends or interesting directions things are moving towards?
In
You think
cannabis
people should
or
get aware
in
of?
in
In both.
mycology.
In both.
Well, cannabis seems like it's on a fast track to like nationwide acceptance and consolidation into like big super brands. And mycology right now feels like the early days of the hemp rush. And I bet it's got like half the legs on it as the hemp rush does. So like hemp rush really went from like 2014 until maybe 2020. It's really kind of the fucking collapse. Maybe 2019, 20. So I had about 5, 6 years. I see, yeah, mycology like starting with this year that was just 2023 was the first year of it. So I bet we got like a good 2 years left before it's the same. And it's like these people bounce from hemp right to mushrooms. I wonder what most of these older people, what kind of shit they were into before that they hopped out of. Like, a bunch of them were in the .com fucking boom and bust. They've like constantly been on the thing that if you hit it right, you can make some money, but most people get in just slightly too late. It's crazy. I see the same thing happening in the mushrooms too. Everybody and their freaking brothers into it right now. So it's just basic market dynamics, right? Supply is going way up. Demand is going up a little bit too, but not as fast as supply is going up. Prices are coming way down. And it's getting like I said, any smoke shop in America that in a state that doesn't have legal weed has a counter with fucking weed that they're calling hemp and mushrooms for sale. It's crazy.
Oh
Like
yeah.
mushroom gummies and chocolates. And again, what percentage of that is actually mushrooms and what percentage of it is equally illegal? Schedule 1 psychedelics is fucking wild.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. That and like the truffle explosion. Seeing truffles for sale all the time now, and a bunch of
It's
other
a
things that.
sign. It's a sign of our government being unable to control like the people like they want us to believe that they can, right? Like mass dissonance or mass not dissonance, but disobedience. They can't do anything about. So they just kind of have to let it slide because they start talking up about it, and we like double down. Then they're really screwed. What are they gonna do? Start shooting people, raiding shops, like raid every single fucking shop? Maybe, I guess could do that, but I think people might fight back, or at least like protest. Who knows?
Yeah, that definitely will be interesting. As someone that was arrested at Occupy, I think we're in for something that's going to look 10 times more crazy here this coming election year. That's for sure.
I'm not convinced that there's going to be an election this year at the current rate.
Yeah, well, you never know. World events are getting more crazy by the minute. So
If they don't let Trump on like however many state ballots that it's important, then I could easily see the Trump supporters using violence, and that violence being used as an excuse to institute like state of emergency orders, which would include pushing the election back, right? And if you think big time conspiracy, then Trump is 100% part of the whole fucking conspiracy, and that would be the perfect play. Like, get all the Trumpers mad about Trump not being able to run in this fucking rigged election. Like, the craziest part is that the Democrats were telling us how rigged the elections were, and then the Republicans were telling us about how rigged the elections were. And it's like those are the only two people fucking talking, and they're both yelling about how rigged the elections are. It's like, well, maybe the elections are rigged. Duh.
yeah, no. I mean, we all watched as Debbie Wasserman Schultz was forced to resign the day before the DNC convention because they got caught red-handed illegally rigging the election against Bernie Sanders. I mean, that happened.
Dude, it's rigged within the fucking their own side.
Yep. Completely illegal, by the way.
Oh yeah,
And why
all
would
of
we
it.
never charge
Well,
on
what does
Brazil?
that mean, illegal?
Oh, I know.
That's
But
like,
my point is, if you're going against the will of the voters, that's, you're not honoring democracy. It's just that simple.
yeah, well, Marx said democracy is the fucking first step to socialism, and then that's how you get to uh communism, and that's how you get to a dictator. It's great. It's like the
Yeah,
fucking model.
the only true democracy in history was pirate ships. Everyone had an equal vote, and they'll kick your ass off the boat if you if you're an asshole.
Yeah, well, and then you could argue that like a Native American tribe was fairly democratic. But I don't know. I guess not. I don't think there's any such thing as democracy. The only like system that seems to work is like self-government. Like you have to take care of yourself, and part of doing that and being a selfish person, the most selfish thing I can do is make sure your life is better, because the better your life gets, the better my life gets. And if all the people around me have really great lives and I'm the guy to help them get there, then they're looking out for me too. So like selfishly, in order to make sure my life is optimal, I just need everybody around me to be optimal as well. And if you have that mindset, I think that is the appropriate basis of self-government. And then that has to be built on the backbone of like massive abundance, right? There can't be any of this idea of scarcity, right? We have these systems right now that put people into these, like it's a cage they can't see because it's not a real cage, and it actually isn't really caging them in. They've been led to believe that they have to live in this shitty little urban life that is a scarcity mindset. So they feel like they need to take advantage of other people to get ahead. When in reality, if you step just a little bit outside of that cage, you can see on the other side, like fucking earth provides, bro. Like money grows on trees. It's nuts. You plant a seed, money grows. It's really simple. You have dirt, you have sun, like money comes out. Just wait a little bit. You'll see. And if you could get more people into that, like agrarian ideals of wealth generation, dude, life gets so much easier. And so again, back to like I don't need democracy if everybody's pure goal is to selfishly make their own lives better through improving this whole system that we share together. That has to be the ideal. The trick is how do we get from the shitty thing that we have now to that utopian thing that we see on the other side without, like most of the people dying. that's the trick.
Absolutely. Any other tips that you have? Someone asked any tips that you have for people that are just getting into extraction, and trying to get into the space or learn, people that are, just turning 21 or whatever that want to kind of learn about the industry.
Yeah, I mean, get on the forum and do the research. Use the search bar, like dig in. There's years of content there. Like anything you want to learn is there. And like depending on yourself and your situation, jump into it, start doing it. Be fucking safe. Figure out how to do it safe. Use this site right here to level yourself up. That's the whole point of it. It's got everything you need to know right there to start manufacturing, dude. And like, seems to me like you get a hemp license and start selling fucking hemp, and it's like gets you high hemp. So that seems like a cool little hustle, but it's blown out. So into the mushroom extraction world is a pretty unique little space right now. There's people starting to blow up on it. Start looking into the extraction of other plants. Find something novel. There's lots of cool new shit going on, and just do it. Like get out and start doing it. That's how I got into it. I just started doing it because it was like a necessity. Had an abundance of this one thing. Go find somebody's trash, trash, and figure out what you can extract out of it to make it into something that's valuable. Because often you can get paid to take someone's trash, whatever that trash may be. Like example, in town, it's called the fish plant. They get paid by all the fish processors to take the fish waste and they turn it into organic fish fertilizer that they sell for a premium. So they're getting paid on both ends of it. Like turning trash into gold is like a classic way to make money, and it's cool. With extraction, it gets crazy because there's lots of waste processes. Like in agricultural areas, anywhere with like nut crops, they've got the shells that they shelled, and that often is a waste product. All sorts of weird little waste products that have some extraction potential. And if you're looking to do something like big and novel, look outside of cannabis and mushrooms, because that's what everybody else is looking at. Like extraction is far and wide, and it applies to like all over the natural world.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, there's a lot of equipment out there that you can reuse for other things. Another good resource too, if you guys are looking at especially mushroom stuff, Hamilton Morris has a great podcast. A lot of you guys know him from uh, uh, Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. He actually has a really super kick-ass podcast, almost 100 episodes. They're like 3-4 hour long format stuff. He just had a bunch of really good ones on mushrooms, like the last 5 or 10 episodes. So definitely check that out as you're looking for other resources on that particular topic as well. I know I've learned shit ton on there this year in particular.
Yeah, that MycoFest talk was super. I'm like just a couple feet off screen to the right. That was a fantastic talk he gave as well. It was the one that just popped up on the screen. Go
Oh,
give
cool.
that a listen.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to make it out to MycoFest. I was speaking that weekend at a different event for when MycoFest was going on, but I definitely want to make it out to it. The book that they have, what's it called? They have a fucking killer book. The guy that started that.
You mean Williams' book, the
Uh,
Cordyceps one?
no, 1 second.
What are you talking about?
It's a big giant tome. It's like black and red.
That started what?
Didn't the guy start MycoFest? He's got a book too. Can't think of
Well,
the name.
yeah, the guy that started MycoFest is William Padilla Brown. He was standing in that screenshot on Hamilton's thing because he's about to introduce Hamilton. He has written a book. He wrote like one of the first English books on cordyceps when he was like, I want to say he was like fucking 19 when he did that. I could be wrong on the date. I know he's really young when he wrote this book, and he's just like a high level. He's like probably a professional mycologist. You could call him that at this point. He's probably mastered the trade and has made enough money on it that you might call him a professional mycologist, a citizen scientist to the max. Very cool. dude's a super inspiration. But that's who started it, and he doesn't have a big tome. You know what I think of when I hear of a black book with red as a big tome is John Marco Allegro, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. It's like a black
This
book with
is
a
it.
red.
I found it. Radical Mycology. That's what I was thinking of.
Oh,
For
who's
some reason,
that?
I thought that
That's
was the same guy.
what's his name?
Uh, Peter McCoy. That's who I was
Yeah, no,
thinking of.
he's not
Peter McCoy.
involved in Myco Fest. I want to say Peter was involved with like the Port Angeles Myco thing. Cassandra knows more about him than I do. She's pretty connected into that space.
I'm sorry, I mix up my mushroom guys sometimes. I apologize to
It's all good, dude.
the
There.
respectable people or respective people and respectable people alike.
I think everybody's happy that we're talking about them and their events on a podcast. Like it's all in the right. And then we had to clarify, so now people have to like look and follow along and like, oh yeah, this it's a super super good book right there. It's
Yeah,
wild.
this one, I remember I first time I saw it was a bit. Shout out Josh and Kelly, Dragonfly Earth Medicine up at their house, and Josh showed me this, and it had like all this cool stuff about endophytes that I had never learned about before, and they kind of opened the door to endophytes, endophytic fungi in particular. Um, yeah, it was really mind opening and just a really cool book. Also, shout out to our friend uh, Cass, who puts on a really dope festival each year. I spoke at it the first year. Justin's spoken at it both years. Chris Trump speaks at it every year. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back out there next year. But it's a really cool festival. I'm sure they're going to have it again 2024. And
This right here is the best West Coast mushroom festival, and Myco Fest is the best East Coast mushroom festival.
our friend Matt Powers, another great dude, one of my closest friends. I probably talk to Matt Powers more than any other human being on earth on a weekly basis. I talk to him at least once or twice a day, I feel.
I believe it. The man can talk.
Yeah, he's fun.
Yeah, another incredibly intelligent human.
For sure. And yourself as well, man. I've learned again a lot from you over the years, and I didn't quite realize who you were when I first met you, and I wish I had known. I had put two to two together when we were together the first time. So I very much appreciate you taking the time to come on today. And anything else you want to mention to our listeners? Anything that you have coming up, events wise, or anything you have that they can support for you next year?
Um, I'm going to be doing a tour called Weird Brains, and then kind of like the drugs that correlate with a couple of PhDs that I'm friends with this year. We're going to be we'll be at Boston for AnyCan. I believe that's at the beginning of March, doing our talk there, and we'll do it a couple more times, but we'll get it recorded and put it up. It's going to be really interesting, I think. Kind of like, how do these non-neurotypical people associate with cannabis, or like, and what's the connection there, and why do so many people that have this similar kind of like neurotype all consume cannabis therapeutically the way they do? It's just, and they've done a bunch of really interesting research on it, so kind of help promote that. We're going to do this little panel discussion about it with a little guest at each different region we're at, so that's going to be kind of cool. And then my mycology speaking tour is kind of the second half of that, and it's Weird Guts. So with them it's Weird Brains, and then with this it's Weird Guts, and then the plan is the following year we'll tie it together and talk about the impact of the gut fungi on the brain function, because we are all just mushrooms. So like optimizing that like mushroom incubator you got really optimizes the rest of your biological systems. So yeah, KNF for your gut. That's kind of the idea.
No, that's super cool, and I hope I very much look forward to kind of seeing where your research goes with that. I did want to shout out one other person. Well, since we mentioned earlier, you talking about the little kits. Want to shout out homie Tanasi, started this company, Sacred Three Mushrooms. He has lots of great mushroom kits and gear and all kinds of different stuff over there. If you're looking for, easy to grow kits and stuff like that, regardless of what type of stuff that you're growing, in what species that you're choosing to grow. They do have lots of great supplies, and it's from a great dude who supported the cannabis community for a long time. I'm sure you guys have seen him over at Dude Grows. Also, when we were raising money to help our friend there, Jay Maestro, also be sure to donate to Jay Maestro's one. You should be able to find the link in the description. We're raising some money for him. He's a big, longtime supporter of the cannabis community who needs a little bit of help with cancer treatments right now. And he's did a lot of work where he donated a bunch of mushroom kits to help get people to auction off for that. So shout out to Tanasi and shout out to Jay Maestro.
Yeah, shout them out.
Alrighty, well, thanks a lot. And how can people find you if they want to find you and support what you're doing?
I'm on Instagram at future4200. That's the name of the forum as well, .com. Those are probably the two best spots. The Good Life Gang's got a website, an Instagram. You'll figure it out if you're interested. Hit me up directly. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Very much appreciate it. And all the hard work that you've been doing and making this super awesome community for everybody to kind of have to bounce ideas off of. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, let me shout out one other thing that we've been working on so we're doing a little, let me tell a story here. I was looking for vitamin D gummies for my kids because it's hard to get them to eat enough liver and like fish oil throughout the winter to get enough vitamin D. But I didn't like the quality of any of the gummies I could find. I work with one of the best gummy manufacturers in the world, and we came up with basically a prebiotic gummy. It's pectin based. It's got allulose and agave nectar, although we can also do maple syrup. And then we put vitamin D3, animal derived vitamin D3 into the gummies. And it's called Crunchy Kids. And so if you are in the Northern Hemisphere and it's wintertime right now and you're not outside for like a couple hours in direct sun every day with your shirt off, you should be supplementing vitamin D. Best way to get it is through like beef liver or like fish products. You can get it from mushrooms, but it's vitamin D too. It's not as bioavailable. It's not as beneficial. It's better than nothing. Put your mushrooms out in the sun and they get even more vitamin D2. Put your raw meat out in the sun and it gets vitamin D3, which is interesting. But so I just want to encourage everybody. Most Americans are deficient in vitamin D, and it's an essential hormone to like your immune system and your own hormone systems. So make sure that you're getting enough vitamin D, specifically in the winter. And if you're darker skin, the darker skin you are, and the further north you are, the harder it is for you to metabolize the UV rays to produce the hormone in your system from the sun. So the darker your skin, the more likely you are to need to supplement, especially in the winter. Just check yourself. Yeah,
that's really. Is there a website for that if people want to get those?
Yeah, we're on Etsy at Crunchy Kids. We'll be on Amazon here in the next couple months. But if you just Google, and it's Crunchy Kids with a K. I have to go Crunchy Kids. Crunchy Kids Etsy. If you look, and we're on Etsy. If you do it on Etsy, you'll see it. We're on Instagram and we're on TikTok as well, which I hate to say, but if you want to play the Amazon game, there's a very specific method. But if anybody's interested, feel free to hit me up directly. I'll link you in. You can take a look. We cite all our research. We got it all, referenced on our claims on vitamin D. And again, first and foremost, go out in the sun. Like, don't buy supplements. Go get in the sun. If that's not possible, get it through your diet. If that isn't like something that you feel comfortable or responsible enough to do consistently, because it's hard and you got little kids and life's hard with a bunch of little kids running around. These vitamins are the highest quality. I specifically made them so that I could feed them to my kids.
There we go. Found it. Took me a second. I apologize. That's Crunchy Kid on with a K.
There you go.
On Etsy.
Yeah, we have adult, the adult one's 5,000 IU and the kid one is 500 IU. Um, and I strongly encourage everybody, if you can afford it, to go get your blood tested and see what your vitamin D levels are at.
Very interesting. That's really cool. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing a whole host of knowledge. I know I certainly learned a lot, and I'm definitely going to have you back on again in the future. Thanks so much.
Yeah. It was fun talking with you, man.
Yeah, absolute blast. Really appreciate it. And one last note here at the end of the show. Be sure to check out Copyleft Cultivars. If you guys have a couple extra bucks, you want early access to natural farming AI, or you just want to come out and support us and help the movement, you guys can check that out. Again, check out last week's episode and on growing with fishes, and then next week's episode on the Growcast with Jordan River. And if you want to learn more about it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. You guys can find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, all the things. You can also find this channel in video format over on Rumble as well. I know a lot of people are switching to Rumble because YouTube's getting increasingly harsh, especially I think with this next election year. It's going to get harder and harder to have a free voice on YouTube. So I think we might eventually transition over there entirely. We'll kind of see how things go in the next year. But I know some other cannabis people are facing some harassment on their channel lately. So thanks everybody for watching. Catch you guys again next week in the new year. Have a good one.